Hey everyone, it's Anna J. Wellner with the Bookish Nook, part of the Author Library Network, sponsored by Creative Edge Publicity. And with me today, I am pleased to have author Miles Cameron. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. So Miles writes high fantasy and sci-fi. For our audience out there, can you tell us the difference between sci-fi and fantasy? Because I know that in especially categories, they kind of are side by side, or at worst lumped in with each other, and that is so very not the case.
So I'm going to be really confusing and say, first of all, I like that they're lumped together as speculative fiction, because I would say that at its roots, science fiction is often about technology, but also about not just the future, but about us. So Star Trek or Isaac Asimov or whatever, they tend to date, because you look at them and go like,
Right.
Oh, but their vision of the future, you know, the Klingons are obviously the Russians, that there's obviously a Cold War. And this is very much a moment in the 60s and the 70s. And yet at the same time, they're talking intelligently about things like misogyny and racism, which we still have. So, you know, there we go. Science fiction is very good at that, but good fantasy is too. Fantasy is often not just escapist literature. And I would say, even outside of your question, it's a truism amongst professional historians that mostly when historians write about the past, they're writing about themselves. And I'm afraid that that is how I see all of speculative fiction. You look at speculative fiction, and we are mostly talking about the world we live in and how it relates to this other world. So, having been confusing, I will get back to your point and say, I've always loved science fiction because I always have loved imagining the future. And quite frankly, I love spaceships and space and all that techie stuff. And I loved some aspects of physics, although I wasn't particularly gifted at the math parts. But I have always really loved, and I think this counts, the idea that when you stare off on a starry night, you are looking at
The past.
Infinite universe with light that is 400 million years old, just making it to Earth. And then quantum entanglement. What even is that? Anyway, so there's that. But to go back to my first point, I think a lot of science fiction uses science-y ideas to stand in for the magic of a fantasy novel. And things happen that are outside of our normal. I won't use the term paranormal because that's different. Let's call it supranormal. Supranormal things happen. And supranormal things happen because the magic user, I mean the scientist, can make that happen. And that causes me to maybe be a little wary of how different they are. However, I've also noticed, as a person of a certain age who watches like changes and trends, that a lot of people recently want their science fiction to be about politics. And they want it to have certain definitive markers about where politics should go and how the world should work, as they head to different futures. And I find that interesting. It's a thing, but I've always enjoyed some very out there science fiction like Kenneth MacLeod, who's an out and out Marxist, writing about a Marxist future. And, you know, he's a Marxist Scotsman. His view of the future is not the same as an American capitalist view of the future. And I think it's super fun to look at those, because look, they're just as valid. None of us can tell what's going to happen in the future.
Well, I think one to the point that I was trying to make is that there's a fair bit more of actual science, math, and things of that nature, truth in science fiction than in fantasy, because in fantasy we can sort of make those things into our own system of magic and our own system of whatever it is that we deem necessary for the plot. So, but within science fiction, you're more you're more kind of constrained by, as you said, physics and by different sorts of things that people come to expect in there. So there needs to be a little more of an element of scientific truth to science fiction versus fantasy.
Apologies for the ringing phone in the background, which I could do nothing about.
No, I didn't hear it.
I don't disagree at all. I'm just going to say most science fiction, even of the hardest, and I leave aside a few great writers like Alistair Reynolds in the UK, have faster than light travel.
Mm-hmm.
Not within physics, not that we understand. But I take your meaning. It's just that you can play games with science. And I'm
you
probably
can,
jumping,
and to
I'm
be
probably jumping the
theoretical.
gun, but when I write fantasy, I'm very interested in how people historically used to make the world work. So, for example, in the Red Knight series, it's neo-Hermetic philosophy that makes magic work. And that is how people for 2,000 years imagined physics worked.
So you are actually incorporating historical knowledge into those series that you have, and guys, the series, or the Traitor Son Cycle and the Masters and Mages series that you have that are out right now, are those completed? Are those complete series that you have?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that was too short an answer, but
Sorry?
I imagine that I will eventually write another couple of Traitor Son books because I know what would happen next. Masters and Mages, all of my fantasy novels are set in the same sort of hermetic multiverse. And eventually I intend to have a sort of Marvel Comics Ragnarok, where Infinity War, where it all comes together. But we'll see. That's years in the future, I hope.
Well, let me see. So Artifact Space is the most recent adventure that you have, and it's available now. It follows the main character, Marka, but there's a lot of other dynamics in the mix as well. What can you tell readers about the book and what they can expect from Artifact Space, which is your science fiction, I would say, part of your catalog?
Okay, well, let's start at the beginning. It's 6 centuries in the future. Science has not progressed as much as you imagine because humanity has gone through a dark age in between, where basically the oceans died and really only a handful of people got off the planet. Earth didn't die. The ecosystem was saved. There's still a few whales and so on, but it was really bad. So it's not a sparkling, amazing, high-tech future. It's more of a, wow, is that as good as we got in 600 years future? While humanity has spread to quite a few planets, in fact, far more planets than the characters are even aware in the first book, humanity is sort of bound together by these traders who have to make the long, long jumps between inhabited planets. And these voyages take years because even though I've allowed them faster than light travel, I haven't entirely eliminated the sort of relativistic time that passes. So you have to imagine big ships that go for a really long time, 5 or 6 years. And they are what bind together the sort of far-flung arms of humanity. It wouldn't be going too far to say the whole, not just the plot, but sort of the reason of the novels is this time delay, which creates a constant sort of confusion and also trading. I mean, you know something about finance and money, trading and banking, where all of your information is 4 to 5 years late, would be very complicated.
That would be inconvenient.
And investment done 2 jumps away, where anything you invest, by the time it gets there, years have passed, and by the time your profits come back, you can imagine how very complicated this would be. So I tried to imagine that. Okay. And yet at the same time, because I love history, it's all very loosely based. on the Venetian great galleys of the 14th and 15th century and their magnificent overseas trade empire, where, ships would go to England from Venice with all of those spices and things from the East. Like literally in the 14th century, if you ate gingerbread in the north of England, your ginger had started in Alexandria, Egypt, and gone on a Venetian ship to London before it got shipped across country to northern England. And sort of taking that and expanding it into I won't say galaxy-wide, but multiple star system-wide world seemed fun to me.
So I wanted to ask, it sounds exceptionally intriguing. Guys, definitely check this book out. The artifact, it's called Artifact Space, and I will have Miles's information in the description below, so make sure to check that out. But if a reader wanted to start either one of your and they are adult high fantasy series, the Traitor Son Cycle, Master, or the Master and Mages series, where would you suggest that they start? Are they intertwined? Are they two separate series?
Two separate series. Each will stand alone. In many ways, I think that Cold Iron, the first of the Masters and Mages books, might be the easiest entry because it's told about a single character, and that single character is your almost traditional farm boy finding himself enmeshed in a plot.
Gotcha.
And if you like the Three Musketeers, you'll probably like Cold Iron. It isn't set in the sort of high fantasy with dragons and knights in armor. It's a much more 17th or 18th century world with a lot of sort of touches of like Ottoman Turkey and Byzantine Greece. So it's a little different, but for the comfort of a single point of view, I would recommend Cold Iron. Red Knight is the first book in the Traitor Son series, and it is set in a sort of hyper accurate, if you can use that word about fantasy, Arthurian world where humankind lives in a sort of civilized world, and beyond them is the wild. And the wild is sort of all the monsters, all the dragons, all the wyverns. And they appear to be against each other, but the deeper you get in, the more you wonder who's pulling the strings.
Quite interesting. And before I let you go, I have to ask, is there anything that readers can expect from you in the near future?
Bless you, Anna. Thank you so much for asking. So I'm writing a new fantasy series. The first book is called Against All Gods. It'll be out in February.
Oh, I love the name.
It's set in a fantasy Bronze Age. So if you think about ancient Egypt and the Mycenaeans and the Hittites, and those are sort of just names. So I'll put this a different way. The shout line, the sell line, when I sold this idea was 1,000 years ago, good fought evil, and evil won. And the gods are terrible. But if you've ever read the Iliad, or even surveyed, like, I'm going to put this to you as a woman. Imagine being a woman in the Iliad. Just imagine what a hell on earth it is. All you are is a chattel.
Yeah,
right?
that was
and I decided to take that and play hardball with it and go like, what if the gods were literally crazy? What if they were terrible? And what if they just played with human lives, kind of like the gods do in the Iliad? And they go like, oh yeah, and the sick, burn that city. What? Well, she annoyed me. Kill her whole family.
Kind of like playing life on a or just kick that character off, like a role playing, like an RPG game. I get it.
Just like that. So we alternate chapters between the gods, who are, I hope, hilarious, while being terrible. They're like a dysfunctional TV show. I think that's a great way of putting it. And this sort of gradual rebellion that itself is actually the plot of an angry god, except it gets away from her and starts to be a rebellion of its own. And I think it's fun. I'm having a great time. I'm writing it. I'm writing book 2 right now, and for what it's worth, I make myself laugh, and I always think that's a good sign.
Oh, it absolutely is. If you're entertained as an author whenever you're writing the work that you are, then it really does come across on the page, I think, for the reader as well. So
that is so true, Anna. And I always tell aspiring writers, like, if it bores you, it's definitely going to bore the audience.
Right.
And I've had to do
Exactly.
that to myself 100 times and go like, this isn't, my
Yeah.
eyes are skimming over my
I
own work.
know. Yeah, it's so difficult. Whenever you can't, I know whenever I'm on to something that I'm like I can't wait until my kid goes to sleep and it's writing time so that I can get back to the story that I was writing. And that's whenever I'm like, yeah, I'm on a roll. I get excited because that's the fun part of being an author.
Absolutely. And I have to say, Anna, I'm actually glad you mentioned that because that's literally where I am now. I just did the copy edit for book 1. And because I've just started book 2, they come together perfectly. And every morning I wake up going like, okay,
Yeah.
here we go, which is really fun.
Absolutely. Well, Mom, thank you again so much for coming on the show today and for taking time to talk about the books that you have out now and the books that you have coming soon. Everyone, make sure to check out the links in the description below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on some more great upcoming content. Miles, thank you again for coming on the show. And everyone else, stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you again soon. Bye.
Thanks, Anna. Take care.
You too.